Hello, I'm Claire Dean, the person behind the Puddletown Panorama, also known as the PTP or the Puddletown for short. The Puddletown is a mobile exhibit space dedicated to the display of stereo or 3D photography. We're going to be building this in time for Burning Man this year, 2017, so that we can highlight the stereo photography that has taken place at the event over the last 20 years. There's been a dedicated group of photographers who've come year after year and photographed the event, and we don't get to see their work very often. So we're hoping with the Puddletown to bring this body of work to a really large number of people in an exciting and an imaginative and somewhat whimsical way. The format that we're going to use to see the stereo images will be like this. This is a couple of stereo cards, Victorian stereo cards. It's one of the earliest forms of novelty photography invented, and they were very, very popular in the late 19th century, early 20th century, right across North America and Europe. It's a very simple way of producing a 3D image. You take two photographs, a left and a right, which mimic what you see from your left eye and your right eye. You mount them like this, and when they're viewed through the right kind of optical viewer, such as we have on the panorama, your brain is able to fuse those two images and you see it in 3 dimensions. I've chosen this particular format for a number of reasons. As I said, one of them is they're simple. The other is they're actually pretty cheap to produce and you can make them fairly quickly. So this also means that if we lose cards, or they get damaged or dusty, or they blow away, or for whatever reason we need to replace them, it's not going to cost us an arm and a leg to keep the library intact. So that's the cards. This is the scale model of the Puddletown that I made in the last couple of months. We use it for figuring out design challenges, fabrication challenges, and just getting a feel for what we're going to build. And today I'm going to show you some details about the panorama and the Puddletown setup itself using the model. The first thing I want to point out is that it has 3 main components. The first is this device right here, this cylindrical thing, which is actually the panorama viewer itself. The second major structure, if you like, is the platform on which the panorama rides. And last but not least, we have this little guy here that we refer to as the Puddletown Puller, which is a little custom tow vehicle which will move the platform with the panorama around Playa from location to location. And not just on Playa, because we plan to use the Puddletown at other events and at other locations, such as Maker Faire, museums, other festivals, in fact anywhere where we get a chance to show off stereo photography and also use it to explain the science behind 3-dimensional vision. So I'm going to change the camera angle here in a minute and show you each of these 3 components in some more detail. So the first part of the Puddletown I'd like to show you and explain to you is the panorama or viewer itself. The Puddletown Panorama is inspired by a monstrous Victorian stereo viewer that was called the Kaiser Panorama. And the Kaiser Panorama was a huge cylindrical structure that took up an entire room, and around its circumference were 25 viewing stations. The entire contraption was designed to show stereo glass lantern slides. I've always wanted to build a Kaiser Panorama, but I don't have a room big enough to house one, besides which it had some other drawbacks as far as I was concerned. One of them being that it was static. You couldn't move it out of the room in which it was built. But the idea of building one has stuck with me, and out of it came the Puddletown Panorama. So my panorama is actually made up of 5 individual card viewers. And inside each one of these card viewers is a set of unique about 8 to 10 stereo cards. The viewers themselves are arranged like the spokes of a wheel, so you still have the cylindrical form of the Kaiser Panorama. The mechanism inside each viewer to show the cards is a vertical carousel system, and the best analogy that I can come up with is to have you think of a Rolodex, but instead of address cards or business cards popping up as you turn it, stereo cards do, so that they line up in front of the eyepieces and you can view them. So the first piece of interactivity that takes place is our participants come up onto the platform, they take a seat in front of one of the viewers, and then by rotating a handle, indicated here by the black button, they flip up those stereo cards in front of the eyepieces. When they've seen all 8 or 10 of them, the next piece of interactivity comes into play, because they then have to talk to the other folks seated around the viewer to make sure that they have all finished looking at their set of cards. And when everybody is ready, you rotate the entire panorama until the next viewing station is in front of your seat. And then you repeat the whole process. You turn the handle, look at all the cards. When you're all done, everyone else is done, you move to the next station, and so forth, until you have viewed all 5 unique sets of cards, at which point you get up and give someone else a go. Each of these viewers will be designed so that they slide out of this frame. That will enable me to maintain them with much ease, in that I can put them into a trailer or a tent or wherever to change the cards out, do maintenance on the mechanism, clean the lenses, reset the cards, and then eventually bring the viewer back out to the frame, slide it back in, lock it in place. The locks will be hidden by these metal strips right here, and then off we go again to a new location with a new set of cards. The platform serves 2 functions. It is the primary exhibit space for the stereo photography, as you see set up here on the model, but it's also serving as our primary transportation trailer. Everything about the Puddletown disassembles and will ride on this trailer, including the Puddletown puller. I'm having the frame constructed by a professional trailer fabricator, and I'm going that route to make sure that it is engineered correctly and that it is road legal. It also gives me an opportunity to have them build a couple of custom features for me, one of them being a section of railing which will slot in here when we're using this for transportation, so that will prevent anything rolling off into the road. And similarly, this back section of railing will be removable so that we can put a loading ramp onto the back end there to get the puller up onto the platform, and also just to generally aid in loading the trailer. And the trailer will be made of steel. The trailer platform is covered by a canopy, and the canopy frame will be square section tubing, either 2 inch by 2 inch or 1.5 by 1.5. And the canopy cover will be a mesh material to reduce wind resistance, but I'm still identifying what that is exactly going to be. It may be a simple shade cloth, it may be some other form of perhaps a metal mesh. There are at the moment 3 levels of lighting on the puller, on the platform. One being an edge of bulbs that run all the way around the lower part of the canopy. This edging will be 10-watt Edison-style LEDs every 10 inches or so. We've already tested these, and they produce a huge amount of light, which will make the entire thing visible from a distance, as these are fairly high up, but also throw enough light onto the platform to make it safe for folks walking around at night time. There will be LEDs on the underside of this low rail, probably color-changing ones. These are more for decoration, but they also serve to define the edge of the platform very clearly, both for folks approaching the platform and also for those actually up on top of it. The third level of lighting are the gas lanterns, which you see represented by these little guys. The gas lanterns will be fueled by propane. The propane is stored in this storage bench here, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And the hoses will actually run underneath the platform and then come up the frame uprights and then into the actual lanterns themselves. The burners will be either commercially made single flame propane burners that are actually designed for use in lanterns on buildings, or they will be an adapted Bunsen burner of some form. We're still working on that. Either way, the flame will be enclosed in a glass chimney or a glass frame lantern. They're positioned standing off from the uprights for a couple of reasons, both of them safety related. One, to keep them away from the canopy, and two, to make sure that anybody who might walk past here or lean on this upright is not going to be right against a hot lantern. Other features of the platform that you can see here, first of all, are the access steps that you see on the side. These will either just simply lift up and ride on the platform when we're moving between locations on Playa, or we may devise a system for them to hinge up and lock vertically again while we're moving on Playa. Then they can be lowered so folks can walk up onto the platform. Moving around to this end, we see the tongue, and I forgot to mention we will have lighting on the tongue as well, so that it is clear to anybody that the space between the platform and the puller is actually filled with something. The two items are connected. This is not just decorative, but it's a safety feature as well. This box is a generator box. There'll be a 2,000 watt generator that rides in that and provides our power primarily for the lights. This L-shaped structure here is a storage box. This end will be where our gas cylinders are. There'll be two 20-pound propane cylinders. And for our good friends at FAST, on the model here, I've already included the required vents at the bottom of the space, another safety requirement, and the quarter-turn gas emergency shut-off valve, which you can see right there. As I already mentioned, the gas hose will actually run on the underside of the platform. It will be removable so that when we're actually transporting this on highways, the gas lines won't be there. They will be rolled up and stowed onto the platform. But when it's functioning on Playa, those gas lines, as I said, will run under the platform, up the uprights and into the gas burners. Moving along, you see that rail extending all the way around the platform. And then we will have tail lights on here. Again, we have to make this road legal, but it will also serve to define the back end of the entire contraption for anyone who is on Playa at night time. One last feature that I forgot to mention are these little things. This is actually a miniature Holmes viewer, an antique style handheld stereo viewer. I'm going to have several of these available, as well as some more contemporary card viewers. These will be stored inside this bench, and these will be used by folks that are socializing in the area here and are waiting to use the main panorama. As I said, those will be stored inside the box. Inside this storage box will also be the first aid kit, any spare parts that we need. In fact, anything we need to put away can go into this storage box right here. The Puddletown Puller is a unique custom vehicle inspired by the Coventry Motet 4-car of 1898. A 4-car was a strange variation on the concept of a passenger space attached to a motorbike. Rather than have a sidecar, they moved the passenger space up front, forward of the driver, hence the term 4-car. 4-cars were not in production for very long, not terribly popular, because as I'm sure you can imagine, once they attained some speed, anybody sitting up front here was at great risk of bodily injury. That's not going to be a problem for us because the Puddletown Puller is not going to be traveling at more than 4 miles an hour. So other than dust, I'm not too worried about that. Just like the original 4-cars, the Puller will be powered by a motorbike engine. We'll be using a large displacement twin motorbike engine, and we'll also be salvaging other parts off that vehicle to build this one. Things like the wiring harness and any other spare parts, perhaps parts of the steering as well. For illumination, the Puller has a pair of vintage car headlights up front. We have those already. She's going to have LED lighting along the sides here and underneath the driver's platform. These will be mostly decorative, but they will serve to define the outline of the vehicle at night, so it'll be very plain to folks on Playa where she is and the space that she's occupying. There's a pair of gas lanterns up top here. These will be stepped off the same way as the ones on the platform. They'll look identical to the ones on the platform. I just haven't had an opportunity to remake this model to reflect that. But they will be enclosed and set out here so they're away from the driver. They're also propane powered, and the cylinder will be down here underneath the driver's platform. The hose will go up these uprights just as it does on the canopy and to the lanterns themselves. As I mentioned earlier, there's also going to be lights between the platform here and the back of the puller. This whole area will be illuminated. This is primarily for safety reasons, to make absolutely sure folks are aware that these two pieces are connected, and that when this one moves too. We are actually looking at turning this whole area into a design feature in of itself, as we have to have it illuminated. We're looking at building a decorative fender of some form over the rear wheel here, and generally making this a point of interest rather than a point of danger. The seating on the puller consists of the driver's seat and a two-person bench up front. These are wooden, and the supports are Victorian cast iron school desk supports that I happen to have. And once I've refinished them and painted them British racing green and gilded the details, they're going to look really, really smart. It's going to look very beautiful. This concludes the video tour of the Puddletown Panorama. I hope you found it interesting, informative, and also enjoyable, so much so that you'll consider supporting us in whatever way you can. We're really excited about the prospect of getting this space built. And the stereo photographers, or stereo burners as I call them, who have seen this concept and photographs of the model are really thrilled about the idea that their work will get to be seen by the very community that they've been documenting all these years. Many of them have already sent me images or given me access to their archives so that we can get cards made. And that's a huge thrill for me, because it means we already have content for the panorama itself. So hopefully we will get the support we need to get this built. Thank you for your time and consideration.